Good morning and welcome to the first ever session of the State of the Internet. My name is Archana Kesavan and I'm joined by my co-host Angelique Medina.
Hello, everybody.
And together we are going to take you to today's session, but we're also co-hosts of the Internet Report, a weekly podcast where we cover what's working, what's breaking on the internet. And before we get into today's session, walk you through the agenda, a little bit on housekeeping. With respect to that, you're going to be able to, chat your Q&A. We're going to have 15 minutes dedicated Q&A at the very end. So drop your questions. You can either tweet us at Thousand Eyes, or you can post on LinkedIn events. Or if you're, watching from LinkedIn, you can submit the Q&As through the wall as well, or directly on the broadcast. And then a recording of this show will be sent to you shortly. So with that, we'll get started here. Angelique, like 16 weeks ago, we didn't necessarily have what's called the Internet Report, the podcast, right?
Yeah, it's been quite the ride. I mean, when we started, it was really because we were getting a lot of inbound questions about what we were seeing, given that we have a pretty broad perspective or vantage point from which we can view a lot of internet infrastructures. Folks were asking us, how is the internet holding up? Is it performing? What's going on?
I know. And like, if I think back, we've always been thinking of doing a podcast, just from the perspective of covering, the good, bad, and the ugly of internet and outages. But until COVID and the work from home mandate actually kicked in, and this, spotlight on the internet went up, and we didn't necessarily get to actually doing this weekly podcast.
Yeah, that's right. And it was interesting because there was a lot of discussion, largely from people outside of the network operations community about, is, for example, Netflix going to break the internet, not really understanding how CDNs work or content delivery necessarily works. And so there was a lot of not necessarily misinformed, but just sort of, like a layperson's understanding of how the internet works. And that was actually one of the reasons why, again, why we started kind of putting more content out. But also one of the reasons for a show like this is to give a lot of the network operators the forum to kind of discuss what they were doing behind the scenes in terms of serving content and keeping, everything flowing.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I remember talking to, some of our customers and kind of asking, how are you guys? Do you have any place where you can go in and meet up with other, enterprise folks and kind of discuss what's happening? Do providers meet up? And, other than the NOGs, like the NANOG or the regional NOGs, they really didn't have a forum, right? So one thing that we're thinking of doing, and the reason behind this event is also being able to create that place where you can come in and discuss ideas, and also learn from how other providers and the internet infrastructure providers are handling critical issues, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had several people on our show, whether it's been from the Internet Society or from SaaS providers, like, for example, Uber. They came on the show and talked about their cloud strategy, or Cloudflare that talked about their perspective on internet security. So we've had really kind of a broad set of individuals that we're bringing in and, providing a forum for them to discuss with the community and to engage. So that's really the intent behind the show, and also events like this. So we're hoping that it will be the first of several, because we have some really great content to share today, really kind of lifting the lid for a lot of folks on, again, some of this work that's been done in the background, whether that's been related to traffic engineering or to optimization of applications themselves. So that's going to be really interesting for folks to see.
Right, right. And then, with that, getting on with like today's show and actually what the agenda is going to look like. I mean, you guys have registered, so you've seen the amazing list of speakers that are here today, but just walking through the agenda a little bit and kind of giving you a perspective on, the different types of sessions, because it is a 4-hour event. So if you can't like stay for the entire time, you can always come back in for specific sessions that you're interested in, right? So first off, we are going to kick off with Angelique herself. Angelique's been leading the research on, how the internet is doing in over the last few months with the work from home mandate and, COVID, situation. And then I think, Angelique, you mentioned this, like the unique perspective we provide and we bring in is from the vantage points and that we have as a company, as Thousand Eyes, and kind of understand how the internet is holding up. So there's some really interesting data in there, so definitely don't miss that. And after Angelique's section, David Belson from the Internet Society is actually going to go on, and he's hosting a panel with Jim from the New England Neutral Internet Exchange, Jana Iyengar from Fastly, and then Scott from NYC Mesh. And his talk is more focused on, internet resiliency in the time of COVID. So stay tuned for those two sessions. There's going to be no Q&A for these sessions, but keep sending your questions. And we have like 15 minutes allocated at the very end, and we'll like get to those then.
Yeah, and then we have actually quite a number of CDN providers that are speaking today, which is great. And even from two ISPs, so Verizon and CenturyLink, from the CDN side of the business, talking about how they've rose to the challenge in terms of delivering content under some very unusual conditions. Some of these challenges have been technical. Some of these challenges have been more relational in terms of dealing with policymakers. So that's going to be really interesting. So again, we have Bill Winutka from CenturyLink, who runs the CDN side of their business. And he's going to be talking about game delivery. And then we have Marcel Flores from Verizon, who's going to be discussing traffic engineering, and specifically around BGP Anycast, which is a difficult thing to do even under normal conditions. But certainly when you throw in kind of just more volatility in terms of traffic volumes and traffic patterns, and then it just becomes exponentially more challenging. So he's going to talk a little bit about how they dealt with that. So that's really interesting. And then we have Akamai.
Yeah, we have Roger Barranco, who's the VP of Global Security Operations from Akamai, coming in. And it's I was talking to Roger earlier, and his presentation is really interesting, right? Because when we think about like COVID and is the internet holding up, we're pretty much thinking about it from the perspective of is anything breaking and how is performance, right? But Roger's going to talk about this other perspective in terms of vulnerabilities and DDoS attacks on the internet, right? I mean, and we know that the internet is like by default, based on inherent trust, and there's a lot of compromising events that can happen. So he's going to take that lens of how has security, how does that look on the internet during COVID? And after Roger, we have Jeff from AppNic.
Yeah, Jeff is Jeff is always, for those of you who are familiar with him, he's chief scientist at AppNic. Really great speaker and always has an interesting perspective to share. And regardless, of what that perspective is, it's always, very thought-provoking. So we're excited to hear him discuss the evolution of protocols. So he's going to talk about kind of more, providing a little bit of a timeline in terms of how they've evolved and who is really driving the future of the internet, if you will. So that's going to be a great talk to close us out.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear Jeff talk and his analogies that's going to follow in that session. So that's going to be really interesting. All right. with that, and then we're going to end it with a 15-minute Q&A, like I said, and just the first two sessions, Angelique's and David Belson's session, we will skip the Q&A, so keep them coming. The other sessions, if we have time, after the speakers finish, we'll try to take a question or two, but if not, the last 15 minutes is just dedicated to answering your questions, so please keep them coming throughout the show. With that,